Hi, everyone. My name is Andy Carlton. I am the manager at our Elkins location, and I will be doing some housekeeping rules tonight, along with some ending. So tonight we have our sales specialist, Ms. Christy Keeler, as well as NT Cosby on a cattle chat series. Please just make sure at the beginning that all of your lines are muted. That way we don't have a lot of background noise and we can hear Dr. Cosby a little better. If you are joining, you can see over on the far left, there's a join audio. If you just want to be able to hear, you can click on that join audio to be able to hear, and as well as us hear you when you have questions. If you do have questions and you're on a computer, there is a little chat box at the bottom. If you click on that chat box, you'll be able to drop us any questions throughout the night. That way we can be sure to answer them throughout the series or at the end. And then if you're on a cell phone, there's going to be 3 little dots that say more. Once you click on that area, one of the options will be chat. So you can hit chat and then type it in the little chat box and send it to us. We'll also be live streaming tonight. So if you are on Facebook, just drop your comment in the bottom and we'll be sure to get it as we go through tonight. If you would let us know what area you're from while you're on, we would love to see what stores you go into and where you're located at. So tonight we have Dr. NT Cosby. He is a nutritionist for Purina Animal Nutrition, and we're going to be talking about the bulk feed ingredients that we have in Van Buren, as well as balancing that with minerals and the value of ionophores.
So with that, NT, we're going to turn it over to you and let you get started there this evening. So we appreciate you joining on.
Okay, thank you all for joining. Andy, appreciate the housekeeping though, and for everybody that is on. Once I start slide presentation, I may not be able to see your chatted questions, but Christy and Andy will be monitoring those. If you're on Facebook Live, dropping those questions into the comments, they'll be monitoring those. So rest assured, if we don't see them and get to them during the conversation this evening, we'll get to them at the end and be glad to answer those questions. Tonight we're going to talk about byproducts and bulk feed and a whole lot of nutrition stuff. And so this is something I enjoy talking about and putting together the program. So let me see if I can find. I am not finding. This looks different this time. I don't know why.
Always the beauty of our virtual live.
Yeah, right. I don't know why it looks different.
So I'm trying to make sure, Sharon, if you could, are we sure that NT is, Dr. Cosby is a co-host so that he can get the share right, the share screen ability?
Yeah, it's not showing my desktop,
Okay.
I guess.
Okay, I know, I'm certain I had stopped share. It's not showing that on my side, right? I'm just, NT, I don't know what's going on. Sharon, can you help us out by chance? He doesn't have the ability to share the screen. It's not, she's saying that you are a co-host, so let me do this again and see if I share and then come back and do stop share. Does that help any at all, Dr. Cosby?
Yeah, let me look here.
Sorry about this, guys. So it seems like we got some folks from down out of the Waldron area.
You know,
Freddie is letting us know that he can see you, Dr. Cosby.
Yeah, I'm glad y'all can
just
see me.
to
I
your
would
screen
like,
to your PowerPoint presentation
I can't
tonight.
get,
So yeah.
I don't know why it is not, it's not showing
Do
my,
you want me to go and pull what we had sent back and forth earlier just to kind of get us going, or did you make any further edits from what we had shared earlier in the week?
I did based on our conversation.
Okay. Yep.
I can.
Can you email it over to me by chance and
I
see if we can
That's
just get started that direction, maybe?
Yeah, okay. That's what I was going to do.
So guys, bear with us just a second here. Sorry for this. So technology is fantastic when it works out for everybody. So appreciate your patience as we're experiencing virtual live. So I guess I didn't let you guys know. So I'm the Christy Keeler, the sales specialist. Andy did get me introduced. I'm located in the Broken Arrow side of Oklahoma. So I cover through western Arkansas all the way over into eastern Oklahoma, working with all the 15 retail locations that the Farmers Cooperative owns, and work with the bulk department, as well as the just trying to keep you guys in feed and make sure that we've got mineral and feed sitting there for you guys to feed your animals. So it's always a pleasure to work with you folks. So tonight, if you got any questions, feel free to drop those into the chat as we're working through kind of what we've got going on here.
You should have it, Christy.
Okay, I am checking. I'm going to reload the screen here and see if I can get that into. I haven't gotten it yet, Dr. Cosby. I still don't have it yet.
All right. Hang on, I'll send it again.
Okay. We will get here eventually, right? All right, something just popped in the inbox, so we'll get this up and going. There we go. They both came at one time, so we are ready to roll in just a second, folks. All right. All right, Dr. Cosby, I think we got you ready to roll now. Sorry for that little delay there.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry for the delay here this evening. So we'll talk about the 3 Bs, byproduct feed, some ingredients, how to balance with those, and then how we can help with your operation and the Farmers Co-op Van Buren putting together some bulk feed options for you. So that picture there is actually kind of the process of starting with corn and ending up with ethanol, if you're interested. So you just kind of start there at the top left, and corn is cleaned, goes through the grinding process. An enzyme is added to start fermenting the starch in the corn, and you can see it goes through several steps and ultimately is distilled. And at that point, it's really not any different than making alcohol for consumption. And in fact, where you see there that ethyl alcohol, one of the things that ethanol producers have to do is actually add a little bit of gasoline to the ethyl alcohol at their facility so that it doesn't actually get consumed for human consumption. So a little bit of trivia there. And then actually you can see there the byproducts that we're more familiar with from the wet distillers grains, dry distillers grains, and then the corn syrups. So just a little bit of a graphic there of what happens and to kind of get things kicked off. So Christy will go on to the next slide. And we'll talk about some of these common byproducts. Now, not all of these are at the co-op at Van Buren, but you will hear about them. There will be other blenders and maybe some commodity brokers that talk about these. So just wanted to give you a real baseline knowledge of what some of the byproducts are, the nutrient profile, and maybe how you can use them. So for example, corn, starting with number 2, yellow corn, we can get those byproducts below there you'll often hear about. So hominy feed, distillers grains, and gluten feed. We'll talk about those. From rice, we can get rice bran, rice mill feed, and the rice hulls. Cotton, of course, oftentimes we'll see customers, particularly in the dairy side of the business, use some whole cotton seed. I balanced some rations for some customers in Southwest Arkansas last week using whole cotton seed because it was a value to them and in their operation. So we'll see that occasionally. Of course, Cottonseed Hulls, a really good roughage source. We'll talk about those. And then ultimately, of course, the cottonseed meal. And then some other byproduct feeds we'll often see. The soybean hulls, of course, byproduct of soybean oil. And out of that comes soybean meal. We don't often use soybean meal in cattle rations simply because some of the other species will outbid us for it. So for example, that goes into a lot of swine and poultry diets because of the value of soybean meal in those diets. And then wheat middlings, which are a byproduct of the wheat flour industry. So we'll talk briefly about all of those. So with the next slide, we'll kind of think about those grains. And so this obviously is a kernel of corn, but rice would be similar. Wheat would be similar in terms of the components of the grain. So on the outer edge of the grain is what's called the pericarp, and just kind of that outer covering, and that's kind of the bran fraction in a grain. Inside is the endosperm, and that is where the starch is located. In most of the processes, the industrial processes, that's what we're after, and converting that starch in that grain to something else. And then the dented part down towards the tip of the kernel is where the germ is, and the germ contains most of the protein and fat that is in a kernel of grain. And you'll see there the components of corn, roughly 73% starch, 4% oil, 9% fat. And I'll tell you that that number is no longer that number. Corn, I haven't seen corn test above 9% since the last time I worked in Iowa above I-80. And that's about the only place I can see corn anymore that gets above 9%. Missouri, Arkansas corn will typically test somewhere in the 7 to 8% protein range. The other thing that has changed is the plant breeders, specifically for the industrial process of ethanol production. They have shrunk that germ portion and expanded that endosperm portion of the corn kernel because more starch makes more ethanol. And so remember, we said the germ is where the fat and the protein was. So when you reduce that portion and increase the endosperm or starch portion, protein of the corn goes down. So again, protein in our part of the world is typically going to be somewhere 7-8% protein. NDF is the fiber, and most of that is in that pericarp portion. So just kind of a baseline of where those ingredients come from, and then an idea of what we are left with through the byproducts. So Christy, we'll move on to the next one and talk about one of those byproducts coming out of the corn process, and that's hominy feed. And what hominy is, you think about maybe that can of hominy you have in your pantry, and this looks quite a bit different, but really what the hominy is that we use in cattle feed is a byproduct of grits or cornmeal for human consumption. So they take that corn grain, again, basically want to get at that starch, and depending on the particle size of that starch through the process, they'll make either grits or cornmeal. They'll pull out most of the fat and most of the protein, and then the components that are left are combined with some of the small fragments and corn grain that was left through the process, blend that together, and we come up with hominy feed. And typically it's going to be somewhere 10% protein, 6% fat. I give it equal energy value to corn. It is quite a bit of starch in there. You'll see that it's actually higher fat than what we started with the corn, because part of the germ is added back into the byproduct. And one of the advantages or disadvantages, I guess, depending on your point of view, is if you buy hominy and use it in your cattle rations, you don't have to process it. It's always going to come ground like that. Now, it is finely ground, which means flat storage is typically the best way to handle it, because it will bridge up. And of course, in a day like today with a little bit of wind, you would lose some. So pros and cons of being finely ground like that, but a very palatable feed, again, equal energy value to corn, and often fairly available throughout the state of Arkansas for sure. The next ingredient we'll talk about is the distillers grains, and as we alluded to at the beginning, this is the byproduct that is left after the starch has been removed from the corn grain and fermented to alcohol to add and blend with corn for meet the renewable fuel standards. Essentially, whatever you start with in the corn grain, nutrient-wise, is concentrated threefold in the distillers grains. So we talked about corn being somewhere in that 8 to maybe 9% protein range. Well, that's why typically distillers grains are going to be somewhere in that 24 to 27% protein. Fat in corn, you remember it said 4% fat. Well, why don't I show the distillers grains then as 10 to 12% fat when I say things are concentrated threefold? It used to be that way. 15 years ago, when large-scale industrial processes to produce ethanol were started, a lot of that distillers grains would have been 10 to even as much as 12% fat, extremely high energy, a lot of value in the distillers grains. The companies have learned that to extract more value out of their processes, they can do a better job of extracting that oil and that corn oil and selling essentially corn oil versus selling it to cattle producers in the form of distillers grains for $180, when they can probably sell that for close to $600 a ton as corn oil. So they've essentially extracted more of the oil out of the product. And so it's not quite as energy dense as it used to be. Still a good quality product, but not as energy dense. The other thing I'll make a point of, particularly on distillers grains, is remember I said that everything is concentrated threefold. So if you start with corn that, for example, has a high level of aflatoxin or a moderate level of aflatoxin, by the time you're done with the process, guess what? The aflatoxin is also concentrated threefold. And so many plants and ingredient suppliers will test their incoming grain to know kind of what they can expect. It's on the outgoing product in terms of aflatoxin. That is a huge issue for dairies, as you might expect, but also swine and poultry. Less of a factor for us on the cattle side. So sometimes some of my customers have been able to make pretty good purchasing decisions on some high aflatoxin distillers grains because it couldn't be used in other species. Very palatable product. It is usually in meal form. Occasionally you'll see it pelleted, but almost always in meal form because with that much fat, it just doesn't make a very good pellet. Handling is similar to what we talked about with hominy. You have a high fat, finely ground ingredient, so flowability is not always the best, and flat storage is the preferred method. The other corn byproduct we'll talk about is corn gluten feed. So here, the starch, rather than going to ethanol, the starch is used to make high fructose corn syrup, which for in some people's minds, they think that's not a good healthy ingredient in our diets. Personally, to me, I think sugar is sugar, so I don't think it is any more or less detrimental. But at any rate, this is the process that high fructose corn syrup is made. That's going to go into our Coca-Cola, Pepsi, whatever is where you'll often see it. Some ingredients now you'll see it called corn sugar, just to get away from calling it high fructose corn syrup. But ultimately, that's what this process uses the starch for. And what we are left with here in this process is 21% protein, 3% fat. Say, well, they took the starch out like they did the distillers, but why is corn gluten lower protein and lower fat? In this process, they actually remove the germ first. And there'll be a couple other byproducts. You'll see corn germ meal, which will be products usually similar to gluten feed, and is so similar often it gets added back to the gluten feed. You can also see corn gluten meal, which will be a 60+% protein product and will typically end up in poultry diets, and they'll outbid us on the cattle side for that ingredient for the added fat. And then the corn oil is again separated out and sold separately. Because of the lower fat, a little higher fiber in the gluten feed, it's about 85% energy value of corn. It is typically pelleted, and the pellets will often look like what you'll see there, kind of short, kind of brown, and the shades of color can vary depending on the supplier and how much the gluten feed is cooked and heated while it's being manufactured. So it is also not quite as palatable, in my opinion, and from my experience, as the distillers grains. So in some starter feeds and things like that, we have to be careful about how much gluten feed we use. We'll move on to talking about some of the rice byproducts. You all have a lot of those if you're in the state of Arkansas, a great rice growing state. That top picture, of course, is the rice grain, and with still that outer hull on it. That hull is then separated, and we're left with the bottom part there that you'll see the rice hulls. So that's the outer covering of that rice grain. Typically, it's ground. Virtually no nutrition to a rice hull. Less than 4% protein. The cow will consume and use more calories to chew that up than the feed will give her. There is just no energy value to a rice hull. So why would we use those in feeds? Well, in some cases, we may want to dilute the energy. So that's what I've got there, an energy diluent. That's a new word for me, and I kind of like saying it, so I put it in this presentation. So energy diluent. So that means it dilutes the energy value of the ration. And of course, if you all have some poultry barns, you know that rice hulls make an excellent bedding material, and quite honestly, is probably the best use of this ingredient. Another rice byproduct we'll get to is rice bran. So remember that picture of that corn kernel and that pericarp. So once we strip the hull off, the next thing that gets stripped off is that pericarp off the rice. So we go from brown rice, now we're down to white rice once that's stripped off. And that pericarp, that's the outer layer of that rice kernel, that becomes this rice bran. And I've got 12, 12, 12 there. And most rice bran will be a 12% protein, 12% fat, 12% fiber. And you'll often hear about triple 12 rice bran. Not quite as much energy value as corn. somewhat similar to gluten. You say, why is it not more energy with all that fat in it? Well, just because that fiber is not as digestible as some other energy sources and some other ingredients we'll talk about. So it's going to be a valuable ingredient, but from an energy standpoint, not quite as much as corn. You can see there in that picture, it is very finely ground and can create some handling problems. Again, meal feeds, high fat, don't always flow and handle the best. And then the combination of the two previous ingredients we talked about is what's called rice meal feed or rice meal byproduct. So a blend of the rice hulls and the rice bran. And the composition will depend on how much of each they use. Oftentimes it'll be just an even split of those two byproducts, 50-50. And so you're going to end up with something that's 6 to 8% protein, 5 to 6% fat, and obviously quite high in fiber. And so whenever we get into some drought scenarios, this becomes an ingredient that is in somewhat high demand for cow rations because it can extend your hay, extend your grass through a drought. Other times of the year, again, it becomes just something to dilute the energy of a diet. For example, if we're using a TMR and growing cattle, and we need something to dilute the energy, depending on the price, rice meal feed may be a value to us. Soybean hulls, probably most of you are familiar with this product. Again, a byproduct of the soybean oil production. So this will be actually the hull, and here the soybean hull, unlike the rice hull, the soybean hull is very digestible, not as much lignin in it, and so they are a very good energy source for forage diets. They are typically pelleted. Again, not a very good pellet. They will break up after handling a couple times and can create quite a few fines. The key point on this slide I want to mention is whenever people look at soybean hulls and they see the high fiber of the soybean hulls and they think they're a hay replacement. And I'm just going to tell you right now, they are not. The reason they're good energy is because that fiber is very rapidly fermented, very highly digestible, and so it does not provide any scratch or effective roughage to an animal's diet. It will not replace hay. It will. It can kind of dilute starch in some ingredients and some diets like that. But I just want to make sure everyone's clear that this is not necessarily something in a drought that you would want to go about replacing your hay with, because fiber does not always equal roughage, and soybean hulls are a perfect example of that. And then our last ingredient we'll talk about is the wheat middlings. It's again a byproduct of the flour mill. So that wheat grain, essentially, the starch becomes our wheat flour, our all-purpose flour that we're going to make biscuits with in the morning. And what we're left with then is that outer pericarp level layer, as well as some byproducts from that mill separation of the endosperm. And that becomes wheat mids, 16 protein, 3 fat, very good energy product. Feed companies buy a lot of mids. So Purina and other feed companies use a lot of these products because they pellet well. You can see there from a protein standpoint, they bring good value and energy. Mids this summer actually got pretty tight and short, and something you don't think about is because there weren't many baseball games and things, therefore people weren't going to the ballpark. They weren't eating hot dogs, so there wasn't a whole lot of flour demand. And so there wasn't a lot of flour milling going on. Wheat mids became pretty short and pretty tight there for a while through the summer. So anyway, these can be pelleted as well, and are moderately palatable. So kind of like corn gluten, got to be careful about how many mids you use in particularly a starter diet, because young calves that may not have been exposed to them may not like gluten or mids all that well. So that's kind of an overview of most of the ingredients. And I guess I forgot to mention here, Cottonseed Hulls. Sorry, Christy, messing you up there. But like we talked about on the rice hull, the cottonseed hull, this is the outer covering of that seed. Big difference here is that compared to rice hulls, cottonseed hulls are very palatable and are an excellent roughage source. They don't bring a lot nutritionally. Much like a rice hull, low protein. If you just fed cottonseed hulls, your cows are going to lose weight and your calves aren't going to gain any, but they're palatable. For whatever reason, calves particularly love these things. They will provide scratch in the rumen and get that calf to ruminate. And so feed companies love using cottonseed hulls in starter feeds. So if you think about Purina's Precon Complete or our AccuRation Starter Complete, both of those starter feeds use cottonseed hulls as the roughage source because, again, they're so palatable and also provide good roughage, and of course can be sourced in your part of the country as well for blending. All right, so as we think about the byproducts and now how we might start putting together some diets, I tried to separate and categorize some things for you to think about. So sometimes I have, probably within the last year, had some customers tell me, hey, I've got a great buy on Hominy and Distillers, or maybe they've got Hominy and Rice Bran and want me to put together a diet. And one of the issues is with those ingredients is they're all high fat. And I don't, we can't make a cattle diet that's over about 6% fat in total. Above that level, we start disrupting some of those bugs in the rumen. The other thing that can happen with high fat diets is that cattle will actually back up on their intake, maybe not consume as much. So we think we're putting a high energy feed in there, but if they don't eat it very well, we're actually losing calories, and so they won't perform as well. So we need to think about, as we're evaluating ingredients that are available to us, do they complement each other? So for example, hominy and gluten would work really, really well. Gluten lower fat, hominy higher fat. Corn works exceptionally well with distillers. Corn's relatively about 2/3 of the fat of hominy. Distillers is a higher fat ingredient. So those two work really well. Rice bran and corn work really well. So just some things to think about there. High phosphorus ingredients, pretty much all of them, except soy hulls. Pretty much everything on that list is high phosphorus, so we need to account for that, especially on growing cattle, to make sure we get appropriate calcium to phosphorus ratio appropriate. For cows, of course, phosphorus is one of the things we're supplementing and need to supplement, the master mineral, the one that's incredibly important to get cows bred. And so here it's an advantage in cow diets to have some ingredients that are high phosphorus. High sulfur. So the corn byproducts, distillers, and gluten can be high sulfur. Two reasons why that can be a concern is number one, sulfur is a potent antagonist of other trace minerals, particularly copper. So if we get too much sulfur into the diet, it'll start tying up copper and we'll start having some copper deficiency symptoms, even if we are supplementing copper. So we need to make sure we're supplementing the appropriate amount of sulfur or copper, And in some cases, we may need to use a product like the Ionophores product if we're having some problems, specifically with cows, to make sure we're getting enough copper into the cows. The other thing that sulfur can cause, particularly in growing cattle with high diets, inclusion rates of distillers and gluten, is what's called feedlot polio. The long word is polioencephalomalacia, but obviously we just call it feedlot polio because we can only say that one time a week and try to spit it out. So the feedlot polio, what that is that high sulfur interferes with the rumen microbes' ability to produce thiamine. And thiamine's a B vitamin that's often produced or always produced in the rumen, healthy ruminant, and is involved in nerves and brain function. And so when an animal is on a high sulfur diet, and that interferes with their ability to produce thiamine. You'll see what's called brainers, stargazers, and basically they are calves that don't have enough thiamine, and so they'll go blind. They'll start circling. Head pressers, you'll hear them called. They'll run into your fence and just stand there and push against it. Ultimately, those calves can go into a coma and eventually will die. If you ever catch one like that and have the opportunity to IV thiamine or some B vitamins into them, it is as close to a miracle as most of us will ever see. Those calves will be up within the hour, and you'll never know that they had a problem if you catch it early enough. So you'll see in our supplements that we use to balance these products some ingredients that help with that. High protein ingredients, distillers gluten, cottonseed meal. As we've talked about, the primary energy sources we use are hominy and corn, and then middle protein category would be soy hulls and wheat midds. So if you were to pick one of those ingredients from about 4 of those columns, oftentimes you can come up with a very good ration program. So example, if you picked soy hulls, corn, distillers, you'd have basically the standard 3-way mix, right? Or soy hulls, corn, and gluten, another way to think about it. If you pick 2 middle proteins, soy hulls, wheat midds, corn, and distillers, you'd have a 4-way mix that, and in equal parts, would work pretty well. So that's kind of a chart that I think about as we start putting together diets. At the bottom of the chart, you'll see the only roughage source really that is available in these type of feeds is cottonseed hulls, and I call ration cost adjusters, and that's terminology for make my diet cheaper, rice hulls and rice mill feed, because again, remember what the energy value was of those ingredients. So we'll go to the next slide, Christy, and talk about how we balance these diets. So we use to balance our diets with these ingredients what's called Purina BP, and if you're following along, I bet you've already figured out that stands for Byproduct Balancer. And so this is a pelleted supplement. The reason we like it to be pelleted is, as you think about it, the feeds are meals or pellets, and we want this to be something that will mix consistently. You just add a mineral in there. Number one, you're adding a mineral that's going to have a bushel weight of 80 to 90 pounds to ingredients that have bushel weights of somewhere 45 to maybe 60. And so it's going to separate. So we want to put a pelleted product in there that is going to mix well, stay mixed, and not separate. The other thing you think about is most of our byproducts, or presumably some of those that we're going to pick, are going to have plenty of protein. So you don't need to buy protein from your feed company. So you'll see the guaranteed analysis is only 10%. And basically that's just from the carrier that we use to pellet the minerals. What we are pelleting is calcium, salt, vitamins, and the trace mineral component. Remember, all those ingredients are pretty much high phosphorus. So we need to supplement calcium to get an appropriate calcium to phosphorus ratio. And of course, trace minerals, and we talked about copper being one of the key ones. In our BP Balancer products, we do add thiamine. So we can kind of head off that problem with or potential problems with high sulfur causing feedlot polio. And so you can see there in the ingredients section that we add thiamine as well. And then the other opportunity we have with BP Balancer is we can add an ionophore. And I'm going to try to show you how you can get your BP Balancer for free by using an ionophore. Okay, so stick with me. So first off, what's an ionophore? First off, ionophores are classified as antibiotics. So think about what the word antibiotic means. Anti is against, bio is life, so they are against life. So they do, in effect, change the microbial population in the rumen by basically targeting gram-positive bacteria. And what that does is it allows the other bacteria to proliferate, and those other bacteria do a much better job at capturing feed energy and converting it energy that the animal can use. And the main one of those is called propionate. And so that is at the expense of acetate. So we increase propionate, reduce acetate, and the concomitant effect of that is there's less energy lost as methane. So ionophores, are they antibiotics? Yes, they are, but they are not used in human medicine, and they are not actually used for any health claims. Therefore, we don't need a VFD to use ionophores. Rumensin and Bovatec are the most common ones you'll hear about, and the ones typically available in our businesses. The other thing I'd point out about ionophores, when people say, well, you're feeding these antibiotics to cattle, they are an ionophore. Yes, they're classified as an antibiotic, but we're actually, if you want to put it this way, we're doing good things for the environment because there is less energy lost as methane. The other thing is we're capturing more of that feed energy, which means we're getting an increased daily gain out of those cattle. Or another way to look at it, it is taking less feed resources to put on that pound of gain. So in other words, improve feed efficiency. So this is one of the technologies in our beef cattle production practices that is good for the cattle, good for your pocketbook, and good for the environment. And we have absolutely no reason to back up from saying why we use ionophores in cattle production. Obviously, if you are in a natural beef production scenario, these would not be allowed because, again, they are technically classified as antibiotics. The last line on this slide I want to mention is you see there it says coccidiosis control. And so Rumensin and Bovatec are both coccidiostats, but at the appropriate level. So what that means is at the levels we typically will use for increased daily gain or improved feed efficiency, we can only protect against coccidiosis up to about a 450-pound calf. So if you've got 550 pounds, 600-pound weaned calves, and you're thinking you're going to get coccidiosis control by putting maybe BP Balancer with Rumensin into your supplement, we need to visit to make sure we've got it at the appropriate rate, because at the rates we're commonly going to use to bump that daily gain, unfortunately, you're not going to get a lot of coccidiosis control. So does it work for coccidiosis control? Yes, but only if we get it in there at the appropriate level. All right, so how are you going to get your balancer for free? Here's the deal. You buy your BP Balancer in your bulk feed from Farmers Co-op and you haven't put an ionophore in there, that's going to increase gain on your stocker cattle 0.2 of a pound per head per day. Okay, so in 100 days, you're going to get 20 pounds, and I just put those 20 pounds worth $1.30, so that's $26 a head. In that 100 days, we're going to formulate the diet, so you are delivering a half a pound of BP Balancer per head per day, so that's 1 bag per head. So if the BP Balancer cost you less than $26 a bag, you made money and basically got a balanced ration from the copper we talked about, vitamin A, D, and E, thiam, and all the things to head off any problems. You basically made money, and the mineral didn't cost you a thing because of what the ionophore did for you. So I would, unless you're in a natural program, there's absolutely no reason not to consider an ionophore in your growing calf rations. Rumensin is also approved for brood cows, the only ionophore that is approved for brood cows, and it can also improve feed efficiency in your mature cow herd as well. So definitely consider that. The other ingredient we can add into your bulk rations, Christy, as we're ready for the next slide, is called our accuration concentrate. So say you want to get a bulk feed with some of these ingredients and you want to put it in your bulk feeder and limit their intake. So we can use this accuration concentrate, blend that. Typically what we'll blend it with is corn and soy hulls. Depending on the pricing of the other ingredients, we could use them. But typically we're going to use corn and soy hulls, and we're going to use anywhere from 20 to 50% accuration concentrate, depending on what we're trying to get done, how much we want the cattle to eat, how much you want them to gain, etc. So what the accuration concentrate does is adds a lot of protein and energy to the diet, in addition to the ability to control their intake, and so we can improve the efficiency. Now, as you might expect, when it takes away your need to do something, i.e. feed once or twice a day, it's going to cost something. So on the next slide, I've got cost comparison shown here. And so I said, and first off, we're going to read that red fine print down there at the bottom. All right. So these are just prices I made up based on current commodity prices or when I put this presentation together. But don't hold me to this, and then don't call the co-op and say, hey, that guy on your show the other night said this is what it cost. Just bear with me. This is just for example purposes only. Okay, so you get a blend of corn, distillers, and soy hulls, 13 cents a pound. And if it takes 8 pounds of feed to put on a pound of added gain, your cost per added gain is $1.04. Okay, everybody's with me. You put corn, soy hulls, and 30% accuracy in there, your cost is going to jump $80 a ton. So now we're costing, actually I had 16 cents a pound. I just now caught that math. So that should be 17 cents a pound. And at 6 times 0.17, I'm doing the math here on my phone, $1.02. So for $80 more a ton, I gave you essentially the same feed per added cost of gain, and you didn't have to go out and feed them every day. So maybe that is something that is worth value to you. We develop a lot of bulls on this program, develop a lot of heifers. We use this product to get a lot of first calf heifers bred. And so don't let the initial cost of it scare you, because we do certainly get some added efficiency from this product. All right, let's move on to our next slide and just talk a little bit about what the co-op has available for you in blending diets. So on the left are the bulk ingredients they have. So of course, corn, distillers grains, corn gluten pellets, wheat mince pellet, soy hull pellets, and oats. So those are the ingredients they have in bulk. Over on the right are the ingredients they carry in bags. So of course, our BP Balancer, we talked about the accuracy concentrate. They carry the show chow concentrate. So if you're wanting to make make you some show rations for your steers or heifers, they can do that. They have a 41% protein concentrate. So there's some folks that want to use corn oats and a 41% and make a ration. We can do that. We have a supplement we can use to make a starter feed. That's the stress care supplement for weaning calves. So if you're getting ready to wean some calves and would like to look at that opportunity, we can blend the feed together doing that. And then Cottonseed Hulls are available, but are in bags. So have to be kind of strategic in when we use those, particularly on the starter feeds. All right, so got you all educated. It's time to buy some feed. So feed A, 14 protein, 3 fat, 14 fiber. Feed B, 14 protein, 4 fat, 14 fiber. And you say, well, I mean, I'd probably pick feed B. And now Christy's shot the prices up there, and you're definitely going to pick feed B, right? I mean, who wouldn't? 1% more fat and a lot cheaper per ton, $65 savings. So who in the world wouldn't pick feed B? Well, what did you just buy? Let's look at our next slide. So this is, I formulated both of these diets. Okay, so there at the top, you can see, yep, they're both 14% protein. You come down to the fat. One is 3, the other one's 4. The fibers are both 14. Jump all the way down there at the bottom to where I've got it highlighted in yellow. That's NEG. What that is net energy for gain, and that is the ability of a feed to add gain to growing cattle. So obviously, bigger is better. So you bought a feed that, quite honestly, isn't a whole lot better than some pretty good Bermuda grass hay in terms of energy value. That's what you just bought right there. And notice what else you're lacking. Jump up there to the calcium row, and you'll see that it's much lower in calcium. So you have inverted calcium to phosphorus. So probably those cattle you're trying to grow aren't going to grow quite as well when we aren't providing enough calcium. And then vitamin A, D, E, all the trace minerals. So basically, on the next slide, you'll see what I did to formulate these two diets. So I formulated a 4-way feed from Van Buren with 50 pounds of the BP Balancer per ton. And that was your feed A. And then what I used to make feed B was rice mill feed. That's how I got more fat into it, right? But what else did I get? Oh, basically 350 pounds of rice hulls per ton. It's not shown there because remember, rice mill byproducts is half rice bran, half rice hulls. So in that feed mix, you got 350 pounds of rice hulls. So essentially 350 pounds that isn't providing you any energy whatsoever. So that's how you can get feed that tags really well, but you'll see it in your cattle pretty quickly that they're just not performing very well. So we can formulate a lot of things. So just be careful of what you're buying and know what you're getting. So with this next slide, some bulk feed considerations, what I want to kind of leave you with is higher protein is not always better or more energy. So there's some people that think I want a high energy feed. I want that higher protein feed. Not necessarily. Okay. Protein and fat and energy are different. So higher fat doesn't always mean more energy. Our example showed it right there. Okay. So higher fat doesn't always mean more energy. Are you buying a fixed formula or fixed nutrients? So what's that mean? So for example, that 4-way, you can make a 4-way ration, just use equal parts and it's going to be the same every time, same ingredients at the same every time. Or you can use fixed nutrients. And what that means is a nutritionist like me is going to put a nutrient matrix together and it's going to say, I want a 14% protein, 4 fat, 55 energy ration. These are your ingredients I have and the prices. And every week as those ingredient prices change, your formula may change, but it's always going to hit those same nutrient specs. So depending on what you want, either there's not a good or a bad or a better or a worse. Fixed nutrients, you probably could potentially save some money in the long haul, but you are going to have a ration that's going to change periodically and you can see your cattle go on and off feed periodically. Fixed formula, it's going to be the same every time, but sometimes you may end up spending a little bit more because of ingredient prices. Some other things to think about, and we've kind of alluded to, consistency, particle size, and sorting. So is your supplier doing a good job of cracking the corn, having a particle size, blending it, unloading it at your place so that it doesn't sift and sort? And then lastly, I think there's one more bullet on there. What is a balanced for? And in our example, for example, those are two 14%. And if all we're balancing for is 14%, you don't always know what you're getting. You need to balance down to the trace minerals, vitamins as well, and certainly balance for the appropriate fed rate. So I consider Farmers Co-op for bulk. They're a large operation. They have the size and scale and purchasing advantages to buy these ingredients very well in the late summer. Get those products contracted so they can pass those savings on to you. They can certainly service your cattle operation. Andy will talk about that here in a minute. I am available to work with this co-op staff to formulate diets. I'm always available to them and to you to help put together programs and ingredients that are going to work for you. You've got Christy and the folks there at the co-op that are always willing to come see you at your operation and help. And then we've talked about feed, but certainly when you buy your feed there, you also have the opportunity to buy fencing, vaccine, just your full line of products for your cattle operation. So they'd love to get to know you and work with you on feed and everything you're going to need for your cattle operation. So I want to flip over to the next slide here. Put some of those pictures up and I guess turn it over to Andy to talk a little bit about how to order, how to get it, and all of those good things. So, Andy.
All right. Can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I was just making sure. So if y'all are interested in ordering bulk feed from us at the Farmers Co-op, you can get in touch with our bulk feed department at 479-474-6622. If you call, you may get straight to bulk feed. If not, you can just ask for someone in our bulk feed department and they will transfer you right over. All of our bulk feed is made at our mill in Van Buren, Arkansas. Currently, you are able to purchase feed with a 3-ton minimum to be delivered to the farm in one of our bulk bin trucks. Or you could go to your local farmer co-op store and purchase our 4 or 5-way commodity feeds in a 1,500-pound tote sack. We also do offer custom blending. So with a 3-ton minimum, we could deliver that to the farm. And then I know here at Elkins, we also have some customers who get a custom mix in a 1,500-pound bag and have it delivered to the store. Normally, once you call down and talk to someone in bulk feed, you will receive feed in 2 to 4 days onto the farm. I know they're working on some AccuRation trials right now, and when they're available, we do have some self-feeders that customers are allowed to rent out when using our commodity products, and that would be a $50 a month rental fee. Christy, am I missing anything?
No, and so I think that the biggest deal is, guys, is we're here to help you feed your cattle, to help you from a nutritional standpoint. If myself, the bulk department, or Dr. Cosby, he's always right there. If it's a text message, there's many a times that I've been out in the field working in the area that if I run across something, sometimes I pick up the phone and we have a conference call right there on the farm. So that's always handy. I know Dr. Cosby talked a little bit tonight about the AccuRation, and we've got some folks that actually are on tonight that has started feeding some AccuRation. And but if you guys don't have that self-feeder and you've got some interest there, please feel free to either reach out to the bulk department or here in a minute when we get to some other slides to walk you through a little bit more things for your offerings tonight. We're joining us on a $10 off coupon. My phone number will be listed, but we did have some questions that did get dropped into our chat box tonight that I really would like to get Dr. Cosby to answer, if you don't mind, for us. One of those that came in is when you were talking about ionophores and incorporating that into the feed. Is there a particular age that we would kind of start that? Can you start that with young calves that would be on a creek feeder by chance?
Yeah, great question. Yes, we'll often start calves on a creek feeder with an ionophore, and they're going to get that same promotion effect as older. So most of the ionophores have a quite wide range of milligrams per head per day that can be legally provided. And so, for example, Bovatec, which is the one we would usually select on calves early on, is from 60 to 360. So we would target those young calves maybe at 60 to 100 milligrams, and then once they're weaned and going, we'd be up close to 200 milligrams. So the legality and the ranges we can use allows us a lot of flexibility to add ionophores at pretty much any life stage.
Perfect. There was another one that was dropped in. Let me go back. This was texted over to me. We've got some questions that come through our Facebook stream tonight. Had a gentleman that dropped this in. Is we have a customer who we buy cattle from that mixes rice hulls with chicken manure for feed. I'm not a fan of it, but he does have some good looking cattle. What is your opinion on this?
Chicken litter can be a good protein source. Of course, the litter is often, as we talked about, the rice hulls are good bedding, and so part of the litter can sometimes be the rice hulls. And then if he's adding more rice hulls to it, there wouldn't be a lot of energy, I guess. Now, did he say he was adding more rice hulls, Christy, or rice bran?
Well, it says rice hulls on here. So it's from CW Livestock. So CW, if we're not catching exactly the precise information, please drop that back in and we'll get that confirmed. But he's saying rice hulls.
My guess is if the cattle are looking well and gaining economically, there's going to have to be some energy into it more than just the litter and added rice hulls. And I just wonder if they're not adding rice bran, which could work with the litter to make inexpensive ration to grow some cattle with, because you're getting some energy out of that rice bran, the protein out of the litter, and then of course the litter is also going to have some rice hulls in it as well.
So I'm just going to take that to another level. So there's no really true concerns of feeding some chicken manure, some chicken manure to the cattle then.
Not in a balanced ration. There is, there's nothing that says you can. A few years ago, some associations asked voluntarily for people to not maybe use it for some fertilizer, but there's no reason why you cannot feed litter to cattle. But it does need to be in a balanced diet, particularly with vitamin A and some trace minerals as well.
Perfect. Had another one that was dropped in, goes back to when you were talking about high sulfur, the differences on the high fat, the high sulfur, etc. At what feeding rate can a person see a negative effect with feeding an ingredient with high sulfur?
Yeah, usually, this is the one that gets me into trouble, because if you have high sulfur water, that product will, adding another feed ingredient that contains sulfur will get you into trouble pretty quickly. So if you know your water, your well, whatever, surface water, of course, wouldn't be a problem. You don't have any sulfur issues. If you get up there somewhere around, say, 10 pounds of Distillers Grains or gluten per head per day, that's kind of the upper level you would want to, about as far as you'd want to push that envelope, somewhere in that range. And if you actually know the sulfur level in those ingredients, and you can do the calculation, but the number where you're usually start seeing some of those brainers or polio cases is about 50 grams of sulfur, and we can help with that math if you would like that.
Perfect. And so CW Livestock did come back and let us know that it was rice hulls is what he thinks he was using. So not blending any rice bran in on with that chicken manure, Dr. Cosby. So
he must be using some chicken litter to grow some good grass, because there wouldn't be much energy in just those two ingredients.
Perfect. Had another one that came across is it economically feasible to add an ionophore if we're just developing, say, some replacement heifers or some replacement bulls?
Oh, awesome question. I'm glad somebody asked that one, because there's actually some data out from fine University of Florida, which is where I got a couple degrees. But anyway, some professors there a number of years ago showed that replacement heifers fed an ionophore reach puberty sooner. So, I mean, if there's any way at all to get an ionophore in there, it's not only going to improve your feed efficiency, but on your replacement heifers, chances are they're going to reach puberty sooner. So I just can't find many reasons why I wouldn't want to use an ionophore again, unless you were in a natural beef marketing program.
Perfect. I think that's all we've got at this time, Dr. Cosby. So I'm going to, folks, as Andy mentioned just a minute ago, up here on our slide is, if you guys have any questions or have any needs in regards to reaching out to the bulk department, please feel free to reach out to them. The one thing that we forgot to mention is that Farmers Co-op offers a liquid feed as well. So AccuRation, the Purina AccuRation liquid feed is a 36% protein, 12% fat. And if you have any needs or questions for that, we would encourage you to reach out to that location, which that number is 479-629-8183. And it looks like we've got another question dropped in here to the chat box. So if you add the balancer to your bulk feed mix, do you still need to keep out free choice mineral as well?
Okay. Kind of on a cow herd, I would, because in that situation with your cow herds, we're probably not feeding quite enough of the feed mix to get a full rate of mineral out of the balancer. For your yearling cattle, if we have that formulated to deliver a 1/2 pound of Balancer, you would not need to feed an additional free choice mineral to your yearling cow. So cows, yes, keep a free choice mineral out. Yearlings, no. As long as we're formulating it to get close to that 1/2 pound per head per day, you wouldn't need to. And incidentally, if you're wondering, the BP Balancer at a 1/2 pound is probably less per head per day than a 4-ounce stocker mineral. So it's pretty economical product to use.
Excellent. So we had a comment that was kind of dropped back in here. It sounds like I might be able to rent one of those bulk feeders. $50 a month is not much for the convenience. So that's a great little feedback that we've got there this evening. So folks, what I'd like to do this evening, I know we're approaching that hour mark here, but Dr. Cosby, we really do appreciate you taking the time, and I wanted to walk you folks through. Pull out that cell phone, go to your text message portion, and we're going to text 95323. And then in the little body there, we're going to type some text. We're going to type Purina, Purina. That'll get you a hyperlink that you will click on. That will then send you to another screen. You'll have to fill out a little bit of information. It will want an email address and a phone number, and then that'll get you to another screen, and we'll select A and then go to Arkansas. And then for tonight is the Farmers Cooperative virtual meeting. And then what you will do is receive an email back that will give you an opportunity to download and to print off that $10 off coupon to take by any of the 15 retail locations of Farmers Cooperative. So those locations are listed here. So we start down there around Mena, Arkansas, run all the way up to Decatur, Arkansas, and then over in Salisal, Oklahoma, in the Poto area. If you guys have any questions and you have never fed a Purina feed and you've got some interest, we do offer some feed greatness opportunities, some feed demos, from starter feeds to feeding liquid feed to feeding AccuRation. Those are just some opportunities. So swing by, ask any of those folks for some questions that you might have. And if they can't answer that, they sure know how to get a hold of myself and Dr. Cosby. And we're here to help you guys. So we did have one question that also got dropped into our chat box on the stream, Dr. Cosby, which is, can we add the ionophores to the liquid feed?
Okay, we cannot in the free choice liquid feed add the ionophore, and the reason is we talked about that range of milligrams per head per day. And although it is a wide range, we would have to prove for legal clearance that we could hit that to the FDA, and that is not something that we have taken on to do. And partly because, not to get too deep into this, but our liquid feed is designed so that intake goes up as your forage quality goes down, and as forage quality goes up, your intakes go down. So by design, liquid feed intake is designed to vary, which would create some problems with getting an approval from government agencies. So that's why we have not pursued that.
Perfect. Thank you for that. So folks, just want to remind you that it's been fun doing this virtual platform. We're getting ready to wrap this up. Dr. Cosby is going to be back on to join us in 2 weeks. That'll be on November the 24th. At 7 p.m. And we're going to talk about body condition scoring those cows and making sure that they're ready and prepared for going into spring calving season. Then what we'll do is that'll kind of wrap up our cattle chat for 2020. And then we'll regroup and see what we're going to do in 2021. But if you guys have any interest for equine information, sometimes we've got some older horses out there in the pasture with their cows, per se. Ty Cunningham, our equine specialist, will be joining us this Thursday at 7 o'clock. So feel free to stop on the Farmers Co-op Facebook page or jump on to the Farmers Cooperative website. Also, the one thing that I forgot to update on this is to let you guys know there's some folks that do like YouTube. If you've missed some of our cattle chat series talking about our equine, we even did a little bit about wildlife and aquaculture. On the Farmers Cooperative website, there is a link that will send you over to YouTube, as we have stored those meetings that we've been hosting since when did we start off, Dr. Cosby, back in August, if I remember correctly. So just been trying to keep you guys educated. We would love to see you, but we also know that everybody's health is our priority. So with that, I'd like to call for last round of questions. So we have a little bit of delay going out to our Facebook stream. While we're waiting on that, I want to remind you that to get that $10 off coupon, it is going to be text 95323 and then type in Purina, Purina. You'll get a hyperlink, select A, Arkansas, and then the Farmers Cooperative virtual meeting. You'll have access to receive this $10 off coupon. This link does expire, and that will expire in about 48 hours. So that will be on the 12th, which will be Thursday. Then you'll get the email with your $10 off coupon that you can take in to purchase Purina products. So swing by there. Farmers Co-op has got some exciting things going on this year, this fall, with some protein supplementation. Feel free to come back, visit with Dr. NT and I do believe Andy's going to be back on here in a couple of weeks. That will be Thanksgiving week. So if you guys got any questions, need further information, my phone number is 830-330-0902. Once again, 830-330-0902. And my email is listed here, and that's CKEELER@landolakes.com. So, folks, we really do appreciate you guys joining us tonight. Andy, do you have any final words that you would like to say this evening? She might have already dropped off. So, Dr. Cosby, once again, we appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. Folks, we appreciate you taking time to join us as well. And so hope to see you guys here in a couple of weeks.
Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, guys.